Stop. Before you scroll past this, I need you to stay for just 30 seconds. Because somewhere in your life, something happened that should have ended you. Not figuratively, not dramatically. I mean, you went through something that statistically, psychologically, emotionally, most people don't come back from whole. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still building, still reaching forward with something in your chest that refuses, absolutely refuses, to let go. The people around you keep asking the same question. They ask it quietly sometimes, boldly other times. Some ask it with admiration. Some ask it because it genuinely disturbs them, because they know what you went through, and they cannot explain how you're standing. The question is always the same. How did you make it out? Today, we're going to answer that. Not with a miracle, not with a mystery, but with the truth, which is somehow more powerful than either. There is something that happens to certain people in the deepest points of suffering. Not all people, not automatically, but in some, something activates. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth. It's the counterintuitive finding, documented across decades of clinical research, that a significant number of people who experience severe adversity don't just recover. They develop capabilities they didn't have before. Greater emotional depth, sharper awareness, a recalibrated nervous system, a kind of perceptual clarity that people who've lived softer lives simply haven't built. But here's what the research doesn't fully capture. For some people, that growth becomes a pattern, a practice, an unconscious discipline. They move through pain differently than others, not because they feel it less, but because somewhere along the way, they learned, often without knowing they were learning, how to metabolize it, how to take the weight of what happened and convert it into something that moves them forward instead of pulling them under. That is the hidden trait we're talking about today. And if you've been through your valley and you're still here, there's a very good chance you already have it. You just haven't had the language for it yet. Let's talk about what the valley actually is. Because it's not just hardship. Everyone has hardship. The valley is something specific. It's the point where the weight becomes total, where every system you relied on to feel okay has either broken down or disappeared entirely. The relationships, the income, the health, the sense of identity, the internal voice that used to say, "You'll be fine," even that goes quiet. In that space, most people encounter what psychologists call a full-spectrum crisis, a simultaneous collapse across multiple life domains that overwhelms the nervous system's capacity to self-regulate. Fight, flight, and freeze all become impossible to sustain at once. The psyche, under that kind of pressure, begins to restructure itself, sometimes constructively, sometimes destructively. Which direction it goes isn't random. It has everything to do with something called the window of tolerance. Your nervous system's developed capacity to remain present, to stay in the body, to not completely dissociate or collapse inward when the pressure becomes overwhelming. People who've survived real valleys, valleys where the floor kept dropping, they didn't just endure. Something in their neurological architecture stretched. The window widened. Not comfortably, not quickly, but it widened. And that widening is the first part of what makes your recovery look the way it looks to people on the outside. It looks impossible because they're measuring you against their own window, against what they could hold, against what would have broken them. But your capacity isn't theirs anymore. It grew in the fire, and they can see that, even if neither of you have the words for it. Now let's get to the most important part. What you developed isn't just the ability to survive pain. A lot of people survive pain. What makes your recovery look almost inhuman to the people watching is something rarer. It's the ability to transmute. Emotional transmutation is, in the simplest terms, the internal process of converting a painful emotional state into adaptive energy, using the experience of suffering as raw material for growth, rather than damage that accumulates and compounds. When most people encounter trauma, real, sustained, system-level trauma, the unprocessed emotional residue gets stored in the body, in the nervous system, in the cognitive patterns that shape how they interpret threat, connection, and possibility. That stored material tends to express itself through two channels. It either erupts outward as aggression, volatility, or destructive behavior, or it implodes inward as depression, self-abandonment, or chronic shutdown. Those are the two most common responses to unprocessed pain. But then there's the third path, the path where, through some combination of reflection, necessity, and hard-earned self-awareness, the pain gets processed, not bypassed, not suppressed, processed, metabolized. The emotional charge gets examined, understood, and reintegrated. And in that process, it loses its destructive power and gains a different kind of energy entirely. Discipline, discernment, compassion, depth. The kind of groundedness that can't be faked and can't be taught from the outside. This is what researchers in resilience theory refer to as adaptive meaning-making, the capacity to construct a coherent, growth-oriented narrative from a chaotic or devastating experience. And the people who develop this capacity don't just recover, they become different in kind. Not superhuman, not immune, but measurably, documentably different in their capacity to hold complexity, tolerate uncertainty, and keep moving forward in conditions that would immobilize others. Here's the part I want you to sit with. When you were in your deepest pain, when the destructive cycles had their hands around everything, you made a choice. Maybe not consciously, maybe not dramatically. Maybe it happened in a quiet moment that nobody witnessed. But you decided, somewhere inside yourself, not to become what had hurt you, not to pass the wound forward. This is more significant than it sounds. The behavioral psychology research on intergenerational trauma is clear. Unprocessed pain tends to replicate. It gets expressed in the same patterns, the same relational dynamics, the same toxic cycles, just with different names and faces attached. The person who was controlled becomes controlling. The person who was abandoned abandons. Not out of malice, out of unresolved pattern. Breaking that pattern doesn't happen by accident. It requires a degree of self-awareness, emotional regulation, and sustained internal effort that most people, especially people in the middle of their own crisis, simply cannot access. The fact that you broke it, or even began to break it, speaks to the depth of the inner work you've been doing, whether you called it that or not. That's why people look at you the way they do. They can sense it. They can feel the difference between someone who's been broken and rebuilt versus someone who's never been tested at that level. There's a quality of presence that comes from having metabolized real pain, a stillness, a weight, an authority that has nothing to do with status or performance. You didn't just survive, you interrupted a cycle. And the energy that used to move through that cycle, destructive, compounding, inherited, you redirected it into yourself, into your growth, into everything you're building now. Let's be precise about what this actually looks like physiologically, because this isn't poetic, this is measurable. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize its own structure and function in response to experience, is most active during and after high-intensity periods of stress, provided that stress is eventually resolved rather than chronic and unmanageable. When the nervous system moves through a sustained crisis and comes out the other side, neural pathways associated with threat response, emotional regulation, and cognitive flexibility literally rewire. New connections form. Old reactive patterns lose their grip. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function, impulse control, long-range planning, actually strengthens its regulatory relationship with the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. In plain language, people who have genuinely processed severe adversity often develop a measurably enhanced ability to stay calm under pressure, think clearly when circumstances are ambiguous, and make decisions from a place of depth rather than reaction. This isn't a metaphor. This is neuroscience. The valley didn't just test you, it trained you at the cellular level in ways that years of comfortable living simply cannot replicate. So when people ask how you made it out, here's the real answer. You developed something that cannot be shortcut, cannot be bought, cannot be inherited from someone else's strength. You developed it in the only place it can be developed, in the middle of your own most difficult experience, facing it with whatever you had, refusing to let it define the ceiling of who you could become. You developed emotional mastery, not the kind that looks effortless or detached, the kind that knows what it cost, the kind that has scars but keeps its composure, the kind that can sit across from someone in their darkest moment and not flinch, because you've been there and you know the way out, because you built it brick by brick in your own life. Your recovery isn't inhuman. It's the most human thing there is. The full, disciplined, hard-fought expression of what we are capable of when we choose growth over repetition, awareness over reaction, and presence over numbness. You are not a mystery. You are a method. And the most powerful thing you can do now is keep going. Not for the admiration of people who can't figure you out, but for the version of yourself that kept choosing to move forward, even when there was no visible reason to. That person deserves to see what comes next. This has been The Inner Calling. Until next time, keep doing the work.